What is up, everyone? Week 4 of the UFL has officially concluded because it's Tuesday, and you know what that means. It is time for the TV ratings and attendance, but that's not all, because today I've got a lot in store for y'all. I've been working all weekend on this, and truly, I wanted to debunk a lot of things that have been said about the UFL this year, whether it's regarding attendance numbers, whether it's regarding points scored, whether it's regarding that people are saying that the UFL this year is just full of field goals, and there's not enough scoring. Well, I've got actually a surprising answer for you on this one. Stay tuned, because we'll be talking about all this, breaking down attendance numbers, not just for week 4, but overall for each venue, and kind of walking through the pluses, the minuses, and what exactly I feel this league really is doing in a positive approach. Because if you go on X, go on Instagram, you go on any social media, including YouTube, and you listen to people just continue to complain, and, oh, this is bad. These are all bad. Well, I'm here to provide you a different approach to look at this league, and to really look at key factors of where they actually do need to improve, and kind of go over that. So let's dive into week 4's attendance numbers. Friday, April 18th, 2025, in Ford Field for the Panthers and Showboats, 9,674 in attendance. Now, of course, obviously, we know these attendance numbers, it has to be mentioned all the time, but these attendance numbers are a combination of tickets sold, comped tickets, and people in actual attendance, physical bodies. There's a range of how that works that is in all professional sports, of how they calculate attendance that goes for like WWE, even though that's not technically professional sports, but it is entertainment. But that's how they also calculate essentially attendance. So 9,674. I don't think this is bad, and we'll talk about why I think this is actually great for the Panthers. A little bit down than normal, but I have raised some questions, and I'm going to do a study and continue looking at this, that I am questioning. As I've said in previous videos, Friday night football may not be the greatest spot for attendance, at least at this very moment, and we'll see why in a bit. So, Saturday, April 19th, 2025, the Battlehawks and Renegades at Choctaw Stadium, 9,614. Crazy that this was only a 60 people difference from the Panthers game the night before. But, I have hiccups. I apologize. See if I can work through this. When you look at these numbers, like the Renegades have peaked 10,000, kind of gone down a little bit, but I'm still impressed with this number overall. And we'll look at the averages and stuff here shortly. But then you go to the next game on Saturday, which was the Stallions at Roughnecks. This game got 6,613, which seems very low, and continues to be low for the Houston Roughnecks. But we'll talk about that. Sunday, April 20th, Easter Sunday from Audi Field, the Brahmas and Defenders, which absolutely was an amazing game. 12,474. Considering it being a holiday, I thought this was actually really good numbers. And we'll talk about the TV ratings as well for this game, because I think that should be viewed at in a very positive light, considering the fact it is or was Easter Sunday. When we look at week 4 totals, 38,375, averaging 9,593. The UFL 2025 total attendance through 4 weeks is 193,034, averaging 12,064. Now, of course, when you look at the left side of the chart for 2024 numbers, I'm not going to run down them, but if you look at the total for the total week 4. This in week 4 last year was not Easter weekend. That was actually week 1 of the UFL last year. But in comparison to week 4 last year, 214,734 with an average of 13,421. So you're seeing roughly about, give or take, about a 1,400 attendance difference there. And this is why I have broken this down on the next slide by stadium. Now, of course, when we're looking at this number, it is through week 4 for both last year and this year. The next slide will give you more of like an average percentage and kind of going from there. So as we can see here, Choctaw Stadium had 2 games last year and 3 this year. 22,564 last year, 29,310 this year. Now, that number is obviously, give or take, it's right on track, because if you had the third game in 2024, they were averaging roughly, I think, about anywhere from 8,000 to 9,000 per game. So we're on track, and we'll look at that. Ford Field, this is where I think we all need to pay attention. This is big. Ford Field had 3 games at this point last year, and they have 3 so far this year. Considering the fact this year they've had 3 consecutive home games, last year was 23,871, where this year is 30,736. So they are gaining on a great level as time goes on. We'll see how the numbers do for the remaining 2 games at Ford Field, or potentially 3, if they can host the USFL Conference Championship game at the end of the year. Now, of course, outside potentially Houston and the Showboats, Houston could have a chance there. Showboats probably are out of this. I think all teams have the ability to potentially be in the run to host one of their conference championship games. Then we go on to Protective Stadium. Now, of course, when you look at this number, you're thinking right off the bat, holy crap, they lost almost, give or take, almost 9,000 people in the one game they played last year and the one game they played this year. The difference is the factor that it's Friday night. The Protective Stadium game this 2 weeks ago, when they played Arlington at this point, drew the 10,126 compared to the 19,841. And I'm wondering, again, going back to when we first started talking about attendance and Friday night, is we're seeing potentially an issue with that. I'm curious to see this upcoming week on Friday night. We do have a Stallions game, if I'm not, Memphis Showboats and Stallions Friday night again. Curious to see what that attendance number is, and if it is similar to the 10,126, because if it is, I think that leads to some questions. Next up, though, we have the Alamo Dome. At this point last year, they had 3 games played and had already 36,205 in attendance. This year, we have nothing because their first home game is this upcoming weekend. It is going to be interesting to see the next couple weeks with the Brahmas being at home, with that great win they got this past weekend against the DC Defenders, the undefeated team in the league, of how that could potentially draw more people in. Then we move over to where last year they played in Rice Stadium, TDECU Stadium this year. I'm going to continue calling it TDECU Stadium till I can officially see they've changed it to Space, whatever it is. But when we look at this, 2 games last year, 2 this year, we're seeing roughly about a 2,500 drop between seasons. There's a lot to be said on this. The team was not great last year. The team is not great this year. They came back. They have 1 win this year, and they actually look like they could be pretty decent. Now, of course, we all know that they lost Nolan Henderson this past weekend, and Jalen McClendon has stepped in for Houston. He could bring the light that Houston needs to the Roughnecks organization, because they looked like a completely different team this past weekend with him as quarterback. So I'm curious to see what that could do to fan base and everything like that. I wish people would get off the fact that because they're in the USFL conference, that if we switch them back to the XFL conference, it'll magically fix attendance. I'm not quite understanding anyone's like understanding with that or like their thought process, because that doesn't make sense. It's not like, even if they switch to let's say this year they went into the XFL conference, they still have the same coaching, they still have everything the same, nothing would change there. I think that's where the confusion is. But again, when we're looking at these numbers, it's not a major drop between the two games. That's the big part here. But then when we look at the Dome at America Center, 2 games last year, 2 games this year, we can see there's been about a 10,000, roughly about 9,900 drop in attendance between these 2 games. Now, of course, the one big factor, and we'll talk about it in the next slide, is the Dome at America Center has an extra game this year because of the San Antonio Brahmas. That automatically is going to give them more attendance, but they also had 7 games last year and are on track for 7 games this year, with the championship game being there. They do have the ability to host 8 games in the Dome if the Battlehawks can host the XFL Conference Championship. So those numbers may be a little skewed if they can, but it is very interesting to say the least with that extra game, what that could do. Then we look at Audi Field. They had 1 game last year of 15,052. This year they've already had 3, encompassing 37,870. Now, when you take into consideration, if you looked at 1 game last year at 15,000, they're only at 37,000 this year. It's a little bit of a drop, but we'll take a look at that. Next up, we have, of course, Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium, which has 1 game last year, 8,791, and 2 this year, 9,490. That is almost a tragedy when you look at that. But I still am saying, and I've said this week after week, we've got to continue giving this market time. I think there's something there, and it's going to build. I think they need to get the team needs to be better. It shouldn't matter if the team's bad or not, but even in the NFL, when a team is absolutely doing horrible, there is no resort to this that really happens in that realm to bad attendance. We see that with Cleveland Browns when they were really terrible. Most teams, Tennessee Titans, I think attendance has been down recently. Things like that can cause that, but I think still marketing is a problem here. We know that for a fact, and I think that potentially kind of looking at that perspective can get something going here. So, okay, let's break that down here. So when we look overall at Season 1 to Season 2 of the UFL through 4 weeks on the right side, we are looking at the perspective of the entire season on the left side for 2024. We look at these numbers here. As you can see, the Renegades right now are on track to being almost identical to last year. Average being 9,887. They're currently running 9,770. So they're on track. Now, with 2 more games remaining, if they can get at least 10,000 per game or a little bit more, they could beat last year's attendance of overall. Now, of course, if they host a championship conference game at Choctaw Stadium, that could exceed that attendance for Choctaw Stadium and the Renegades. The big part here is the next one. Ford Field, 5 games total last year. Ford Field this year had 3, obviously, and look at the difference. They are nearly about 2,200 more attendance on average per game right now, and they are on track to essentially breaking that by almost 10,000 people come the end of the season. Again, another team that is in the running to potentially hold the conference championship at Ford Field. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. But great numbers there by the Michigan Panthers. Then we move on to Protective Stadium, who hosted 6 games last year with the conference championship, averaging 10,260. This is where, in reality, it shouldn't be much of a concern when it comes to so far just the 1 game. Again, 10,126. They are only roughly about 130 some odd people averaging per game less than they were last year. it's kind of consistent. It's not like peaking. It's not going down much, but we'll keep an eye. I think Friday night will be telling of what comes out of Friday Night Football with Birmingham, and then what happens after that when they are playing at home normal games on a Saturday or Sunday. Alamo Dome, obviously, we don't know any numbers from there yet, but they averaged 11,888 last year. We'll see if that can be consistent this year. Rice Stadium, 5 games last year, averaging 7,056. This year, they're at 6,689. There's actually not that much of a difference there either. When you look at it, roughly about 300, give or take, just less than 300 per game average not attending. So when people are saying that, oh, they should have never changed Rice Stadium, they're getting worse numbers now, they actually are not. On average, they are almost the exact same. That is telling. It's one of these things that I don't think that having the XFL conference under their banner compared to the USFL makes any difference whatsoever. I think that is very odd thing to try to claim stat-wise, but whatever. When we look at the Dome at America Center, like I said, 7 games last year with the championship, averaging 32,780. Right now, currently, with 7 games, they are averaging 31,065. So if they continue the same route they're going now, including the championship game, and if maybe the game's not hosted in St. Louis for the XFL championship, and they had 7 games again, they are right at cusp, about less than 1,000 away, or just over 1,000 away from being the same as last year. So another thing to take in consideration is if St. Louis can make the conference championship game and it be at the Dome, plus the championship they go to it, these numbers will be significantly higher than last year, like massively higher. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, no matter what, there's still 7 games being played there, which I think can average out to about the exact same number. We'll see, though. Audi Field here is the overall attendance average last year was 14,143. Audi Field this year, just after 3 games, 12,623. Another team that has had a little bit of a drop overall in attendance, but not much as people are claiming. Then we look at Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium. 5 games last year averaged 6,893, where this year, just in 2 games, they're averaging 4,745. So yes, they have dropped almost nearly over 2,000, about 2,200, give or take, per game. That is a lot. That does raise some questions about the team, about the league being in Memphis. But again, I still think, as we've been talking about, the marketing, almost in my opinion, has been worse than last year, and they had less timing last year. A lot of questions that will be asked at the end of the year with this, but in no shape or form should they be moving the Showboats, the Roughnecks, any of these lower tier teams, because if that's the case, then they got to move everyone, because the average here, we're taking into consideration last year, the average number through all games was 13,505. This year, it's down to 12,064, about a 1,500 person drop. That can get significant when you're talking that being per game, but again, it's all going to matter what happens in San Antonio and what happens in St. Louis with the Dome, and if they can hold a championship game, a conference championship there, and make the championship. Those numbers are going to be a little skewed compared to last year because of that. I think the numbers would have been skewed last year if St. Louis would have made the championship game compared to what it could be on a normal year where that's not happening. Again, this chance happens again. The league definitely wants it to happen. I'm not a St. Louis fan. I hope Arlington makes the championship, but again, for the league perspective and fans and everything like that, it is the best option for St. Louis to go to the championship game. That's just my opinion. But moving on, let's get into TV ratings, and then we'll get into some more fun numbers here. So season 1, season 2, week 4. Last year at this point, this was not Easter weekend, so consider that. Plus, we had 2 games last year that were going head-to-head with each other, airing on the same network, same time, sharing visibility throughout the country, shared a overall total of viewership of 950,000. We did not have that this year. This year, we essentially had Friday night, 679,000 for the Panthers and Showboats. Considering the fact that, again, Friday night numbers look to have kind of leveled out. It's anywhere between 600 and I believe the lowest was 670 something, all the way up to 690,000. So I think we can see what we're looking at, and Fox has got kind of a view through 4 weeks of what that number is. And I'm interested to see at the end of the year if that made what they're looking for. Probably not. I would assume based on previous renditions of WWE SmackDown, NASCAR, college basketball that has aired has all got over 1 million views for most of its programming. This is a lot lower than that, so it'll be curious to see what happens compared with attendance and the overall Friday night structure. But if they're expanding, you almost want to keep that Friday night slot. So then you have 1 game on Friday night, 2 on Saturday, and 2 on Sunday. Anyways, moving to Saturday, April 19th, the Battlehawks and Renegades, 12:30 p.m. on ESPN, 901,000 viewers. I think this was a great slot that they got that number, because last week, despite the fact it was 2 0-2 teams going in week 3, this slot got on the same channel 296,000 viewers. This week, it's up to 901. I think everyone should be very glad for this number. I think this is great. But then we look at the rest of the week. The Stallions and Roughnecks on Saturday on Fox at 7 p.m. Eastern Time got 606,000 viewers. And then Sunday, April 20th, on Sunday, which was essentially Easter, Brahmas and Defenders, 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox as well, 739,000 viewers. Now, of course, this weekend was also filled with NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, and, of course, MLB. But overall, it's skewed because of the fact of how last year's Week 4 was, with the double game going head-to-head with shared viewership. Overall, total viewership for this week was 2,925,000 compared to 2,140,000 last year. But again, we don't know if those games were separate, if that would have basically got higher than the 2.9 million this time around. But overall, a lot of people are saying these are rough numbers and they're not looking good, but I think we're starting to see a consistency here of numbers anywhere between the 6s and 9s of what the UFL is going to get. We have seen some programming peak over 1 million. That game on Saturday peaked over 1 million. But truly, I don't know if we're going to get another 1 million game this year unless it's like the championship or conference championship. I hope so. But we're kind of seeing where the level ground is with the UFL so far, and quite frankly, we've only had 1 game out of 16 that was very low, and that was that game between the Showboats and the Roughnecks that were 0-2 each, encompassing the 296,000. So very interesting numbers there. But let's move on, because this is where the tales come true on this. So in this perspective here, we've got to look at essentially look at the numbers here where scoring stats per team. Now, this is for 2024 and through 4 weeks. Now, of course, with this, as you can see, I'm going to run down the bottom numbers here on the screen, and then we'll kind of look at the current ones, and it'll show quite eye-opening results here. So last year, obviously, we know total offensive touchdowns, 65 for through 4 weeks. They had 2 defensive touchdowns, 3 safeties, The 1, 2, and 3-point conversions was 1 point was 10 complete or 10 made out of 23 completed. 2 points, 22 out of 42, and then 3 points were 0 and 2. Not a lot of people win for him last year, and quite frankly, it doesn't seem like it's changing this year either. Now, field goals. This is where you got to look at this number. 60 were made out of 66 last year through 4 weeks. Now, of course, through those 4 weeks, there were 661 points essentially scored in comparison to like 661 to 661. So when we take that and in consideration, 661 points total for the league here, this is not that bad, right? Let's take a look at this year. Because this year, this is where it gets very interesting. And for anybody that wants to sit here and claim, there's a lot of difference here. There's somewhat, but there's actually not as many things. So when it comes to, and one thing really quick, let's go back to this. I wanted to point out on this chart through 4 weeks, the top 5 teams in the UFL last year, minus the defenders because they started getting plankered with injuries starting in week 5 all the way to the end of the year, right? They kind of dropped after that. Now, you look at the remaining 4 teams, and those 4 teams were the ones that got into the USFL Conference Championship and the XFL Conference Championship. And again, 2 of those teams ended up in the championship game. Very interesting when you look at that. This year, on the other hand, though, those top 5 teams, Panthers, Battlehawks, Renegades, Brahmas, and Defenders. Be interesting to see. Now, of course, the Brahmas are not doing great at all. They have 1 win. But with Party as the new interim head coach, could see a little bit of a change in guard with that. But let's get to those numbers. So total offensive touchdowns this year, 55. It is down 10 from last year. Defensive touchdowns, this is where the number is massive. It has gone up 4 defensive touchdowns from last year. They are at 6 right now. And quite frankly, that actually paints a picture for everybody. That paints a picture that the league is very defense heavy this year. And that is a key result as to why scoring is down. And as we move through here, there's no safeties this year, which is interesting because it's come close on a few games I've noticed, but not many. We look at 1-point conversions, 10 for 19 this year. They attempted the same as last year. They were just down, they made the same as last year. They were just down attempts this year by 3. That could also, again, we're resorting in numbers of touchdowns. So that's a big point to this. So then when we look at the 1-point conversion or the 2-point conversion, 13 for 40. And this year it's down 9 attempts down 9 completions of actually making the 2-point conversion. Down 2 attempts overall during the season. Then we look at the third 3-point conversion. Obviously, the Panthers are the only one that have successfully got that. But at the same point, it's the exact same number as last year. Only 2 teams have essentially attempted a 3-point conversion, and one of those 2 teams have made it. So that's dead on. This is a number that everyone needs to pay attention to. When you keep going on X and comment fields of YouTube videos, including mine, saying, I'm so sick of field goals, that's all they're doing this year. There's not that much scoring going on. There is exactly the same amount of field goals that there were through week 4 last year, 66. Now, the amount that are being made is down by 5. It was 60 to 66 last year. It's 55 to 66 this year. So, again, keep that in mind, that in perspective, that, it's the exact same as last year. There is nothing different when it comes to field goals, otherwise missing it. That's it. So I think that tells a lot to the league. That tells a lot to people that are not paying attention. They have no idea what they're talking about, saying that, oh, I'm so sick of field goals. That's all we see this year. That's all we saw last year up to 4 weeks, and no one was really complaining about field goals. So, and think about it, last year, as Daryl Johnston said on a sideline this past weekend, I think last Friday night, when he was being interviewed and talking about, oh, a storyline, they haven't had someone like Jake Bates, things like that. That's why people weren't complaining about field goals last year, because it was entertaining. And I think a key name in this factor here is Rodrigo Blankenship with the Battlehawks this year is massively doing very well. He's 10 for 10. Well, you have the Stallions kicker who is 8 for 8. Those are the only 2 kickers in the entire league that are 100%. When you look at the rest of the league, they're off and on here and there. 1 missed, 2 missed here and there. So again, take that into consideration. Now, of course, when you look at the total points and given up, you can see the teams throughout that list. But the big key is here, 570 points have been scored through 4 weeks in 2025. That is down by 91 points overall. But, that can be construed because of the fact that we know that the defense rates are going up this year. And I mean, again, we're going to keep looking at these stats. Next week, we'll do a halfway point, and then we'll look again at the end of the year or end of the regular season, and then end at the very end after the championship game, because I think that we'll be utterly surprised in the end that a lot has not changed from last year. And that people are like, oh, this league's doomed. It's not doing good. They're failing across the board. There's not much great games going on. We've started to see an increase in that. And what did everyone say? Week 4, week 5, because of the shortened training camp and all that type of stuff this year, that affects teams, players, and everything like that involved, where we're seeing a drop in overall scoring. We're seeing all that type of stuff. I think week 5 to week 10 is going to be a completely different league. That on the fact that hopefully we don't have any more injuries. There's more quarterback injuries this weekend. We've lost more quarterbacks for at least the next 5 games, some on IR, some could potentially be done for the entire season. There's a lot of questions remaining with some of these teams. But when you look here, what we said at the beginning of this bullet point here is the top 5 teams: Panthers, Battlehawks, Renegades, Brahmas, Defenders. The Stallions are not in that list this year. So could that be a foreshadowing of what could potentially happen the remaining 5, technically, the remaining 5 weeks, or week 5, week 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, technically 6 games each team has of what could happen. There is a big possibility here we could see a difference in shift after a couple weeks, but let me know in the comments what you think about this, and we'll see you back here on the flip side. Thank you again for joining me for this extra coverage. If you like this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on the video. We'll see you on the flip side.